You're listening to The Interactome, a podcast by a group of young researchers who want to connect you to the world of science by sharing their stories and perspectives. Just in case their bosses are listening, they want to remind you that the opinions expressed here are their own. They also want to remind you not to take anything they say as medical or professional advice, as they are not doctors. Not yet, anyway. Stay tuned about that. And, without further ado, welcome to the Interactome.
Hello and welcome back to the Interactome. You're probably thinking, hey, it isn't the third Monday of the month. Why are we dropping an episode? Well, take a look at your calendar and the day and the month, and there's your answer. We are doing our first ever Minisode for Pi Day, and the team is super excited. I'm on this episode, and we've got Sam, and we've got our lovely editor, Pickle, and then we have a guest, a mathematician who knows much more than all of us combined, because we need that expertise to tackle this subject. We have Youngmin Park, assistant professor of math at University of Florida, Gainesville. So I'll just toss it over to the team and we can do some intros. Youngmin, great to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, I guess I'll start. I invited Youngmin here. He's actually an old friend of mine from back when I was a grad student at Brandeis. He was a postdoc at the time. So when we decided to do a Pi Day episode, he was literally the first person I thought of, because pretty darn good at explaining math. He was doing a good job of that. We had questions for him back in grad school. And so he hopefully will have a great explanation of why we should care about pi, and we'll cover some really interesting things that, I found them fascinating during our prep for this, although I think I've been told not to jump on every single opportunity for all the cool because of the cool stuff we talk about. This is a Minisode after all, but I think I mentioned my name, right?
Mention it again, just in case.
Yeah, I'm Sam.
Tell the people.
There we go. It's been out there 3 times.
I'm Pickle.
Yeah.
I helped. I'm here.
You're like, I'm here, I
Do you
promise.
ever go by Rick?
Pickle.
I'm sure you've heard that before. There's no way you.
I've heard a bunch
I've
of them.
never heard that, and I'm going to have to start using that.
So yeah, should I just get started with the?
Yeah, we've already gone off the rails.
Twice thus far. It's only been like what? I'm looking at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Wow.
New record.
Okay, so all right, so I guess we'll start with pi. So that's the theme, and I'll start with the deceptively simple definitions. Okay, so first, pi is defined. Well, it's a number that belongs to the class of a particular type of numbers called irrational numbers, and the very simple definition of an irrational number is one that is not rational. So there are many numbers you can, and I'm not kidding. So there's many numbers you can represent, right? So there's many numbers you can represent using fractions, and it turns out that there are a whole bunch of numbers you cannot represent with fractions. And really simply put, that is what irrational numbers are. So many numbers fit this. In fact, infinitely many more than rational numbers are irrational. And pi just happens to be one of them. And pi, along with irrational numbers, has a lot of historical significance in all kinds of engineering applications. And I won't go into that here, but pi itself also has a very deceptively simple definition, which is that it's just the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. And you would think that would kind of solve a lot of things, but pi itself has a very long history of not being estimated very well, and likewise with many irrational numbers. So if it's all right, I'd like to talk about some history of irrational numbers at this point.
We'd love that.
Yeah, that'd be super helpful.
Yeah,
So irrational numbers, it started with pretty simple questions. So for example, if you have a square, a very simple geometric shape, well, the area of the square is each side squared, right? And so it's very easy to find the area of a square given its side lengths. But what if you have the opposite problem, where you're given the area of a square and you want to know the side lengths? And it turns out, so that's why the square root is important, because if you have an area A of a square, you have to take the square root of that to find the terms that give you the area. And it turns out the one term you can get if the area of the square is 2, it turns out you need to think about square root of 2. So that's why historically square root of 2 has a lot of significance, because it comes from a very simple question, and it seemed like you couldn't quite compute it for the longest time. So interestingly, the Babylonians had a way of estimating the square root of 2, and it used this method where you guess an initial number, and then you do some algebraic manipulations, and then you have a new number, which is your adjusted guess, and then you do the same algebraic manipulations, and then you have a new number, and you keep iterating like this. And that today it's an example of something like, it's called an iterative method in general. And more broadly, it's related to finding roots of equations. But what's interesting is that the Babylonians had this base 12 system. We have a base 10 number system. Computers use base 2 for binary. Babylonians had a base 12. I think the Aztecs or the Mayans, I forget which, they had a base 20 system. So that's a whole can of worms in itself. But they were able to find up to something like 3 decimal places in base 12 that the Babylonians were. So they had a pretty good estimate of it. And that happened around 1700 BCE, so pretty ancient history. But it wasn't until about 500 BCE where the Greeks actually properly discovered irrational numbers, to the best of our knowledge. And it was someone applying a standard method, which is called a proof by contradiction. So if you want to prove something, you assume that the conclusion is false, and then you kind of make a series of logical arguments that follow, and you reach a contradiction. And what someone found is that you actually can't. The square root of 2 actually cannot be irrational. It cannot be rational. And this was huge and groundbreaking at the time, because he was part of the school of thought where you could estimate any number using rational numbers. And the Greeks were kind of right. It turns out that you can get very, very close to irrational numbers, arbitrarily close to irrational numbers using rational numbers. But they realized that actually there are numbers that you can never express as a fraction. And I encourage everyone to look up the proof of this. It's actually remarkably straightforward. The guy used the Pythagoras' theorem at some point, very basic geometric kind of ideas, and then reached the conclusion that this contradictory conclusion that the side length had to be both of even and odd length. So there was this contradiction that he found. And therefore, the idea that the square root of 2, the assumption that the square root of 2 is rational, had to be wrong. And the Pythagorean school of thought was so insulted by this that legend has it they took him out to sea and drowned him. So there was a history of this stuff in math, and we'll get to another one if we're lucky, where people are just so insulted by this concept that is undeniably true that they resist. That entire generations of mathematicians have to die before it's actually accepted.
Wow. Okay. I still think about that for a second. Wow. So, I mean, you think, I guess, I'm familiar with, kind of trying to memorize all the digits of pi. Not all the digits, can't memorize all the digits of pi, but, people will, sit there and memorize these massive numbers of digits of pi and things. We've kind of accepted that this thing just goes on forever, right? People make jokes about, the entire works of Shakespeare being hidden in this number or something like that, which I don't even know how that would work. It's numbers. But wow, I didn't think that anyone drowned over it. That's insane.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question for my understanding? So you're talking about how sometimes, or with irrational numbers, fractions, the decimals go on forever. They go on infinitely. So I've always been stumped by 1/3, 2/3, 3 out of 3, because technically that adds up to 0.99999. Does that count as an irrational number, or is because it's so close maybe I'm going way off base here, but that's kind of...
It is... Well...
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
I was going to say, a rational number, right, it's a fraction, right, from understanding, anything that can be expressed as a fraction. So the repeating numbers are not irrational necessarily, right? They're by necessity they're not repeating, right, Youngmin?
Oh, okay.
So the fact that 1/3 in base 10 looks like 0.33 repeating is more an artifact of the base 10 number system.
Okay.
Than everything.
That makes total sense.
And the irrational numbers, it's not just that the decimal goes on forever, because if you look at like 1/7, there are many fractions where the decimal actually repeats forever. So it's not that the decimal repeats forever, it's just that you can't represent the number as a fraction.
That is a super helpful clarification for me, so thank you.
I have a question. As a programmer, I run into this a lot. Divide by 0. Is that an example of like a irrational number? Or is that its own kind of?
That's a whole nother, that's a potential can of worms. Yeah.
Before we got on this call, listeners, we were, walking through the episode and we had all these ideas, and it's like, I don't know how many cans of worms we want to open on our first mini-sode. That might be a little tricky. So every time we say can of worms, it's a little throwback to pre-recording.
There's a whole shelf of cans of worms. Although I do have to say that would be just like us to have our mini-sode being longer than some normal episode.
Imagine. I'm sure Pickle would love that for editing. He'd be like, oh great, I have to edit.
Oh, that'd be fine. Yeah, let me edit this mini-sode that, normally takes me like a couple hours. Oh yeah, 2 days later, here we go. Let's go.
All right. We'll let Youngmin talk then, so that we don't torture Pickle.
Yeah, so maybe, Youngmin, you could get into, we talked a little bit about that pi relates to your work pretty heavily in the research that you do. So maybe if you just want to walk us through that and the relation.
Sure. So pi is, intimately related to periodicity, and in particular trigonometric functions, sine and cosine. They are 2 pi periodic, or 2 pi times n periodic, where n is an integer. And this is, these functions, and unfortunately I can't go into the details, but there are tons and tons of engineering applications related to this. But to just get to the point, I look at periodic behavior, and I try to understand periodic behavior, and in particular in neuroscience. So, or more generally biology. So there are all kinds of rhythmic periodic behaviors in nature, in physics. So the cycle of the sun, which drives the circadian rhythm, things like sound waves, the kind of pressure wave, the pressure that carries sound waves, those are periodic phenomena in and of themselves. We have things like neurons that are responsible for controlling rhythmic motion. So breathing, swimming, walking, eating, digesting. These neurons are highly rhythmic in nature, and you can see a very regular periodicity in a lot of these neurons. So my job is to take very complicated models of neurons. I mean, we can always go arbitrarily complicated with biological models. But what I try to do is reduce the complexity to the point where we as humans can understand exactly what's happening. And the benefit of this, right? So on the one hand, our computing power is good enough that we can really compute amazingly detailed models of the brain or some biological system. But then at that point, it gets to a point where we're just simulating something that's as complicated as the biological system itself. So we're not really gaining anything from it necessarily. So what I'm trying to do is reduce the complexity to something so simple that we can just look at a piece of paper and say, oh, I see. I can prove without a shadow of a doubt that such and such phenomenon actually is happening as you change this parameter related to, the frequency or the coupling strength between neurons, or some basic parameter like that. And the benefit of that is math. The powerful thing about math is that once you prove something, it's true forever. That's it. For as long as humanity will exist and beyond, the proofs that are true today will still be true beyond that point.
The proof is in the math pudding.
Oh yeah, and that explains kind of
why
we were talking about the proofs in the pie. So that explains why we were talking about Greeks, right? Because they proved that pi must not be even or odd, right? They proved it a long time ago. That's
So
true.
that proof was more with square root of 2. So it was more with the existence of irrational numbers. But Euclid's Elements, for example, I mean that's over 1,000 years old, and as long as you accept the axioms, everything else in those volumes of text are true, and they always will be. So computers can get us very far, but with the kind of work I do, we can go back and say, look, this phenomenon actually is happening, or it actually isn't, because that's clearly a bug, because under these conditions, I know that this can or can't happen.
So you say that your work relates to periodicity. Is that how you pronounce it? Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
How can you use pi to make those models that prove what you're trying to prove? I guess I'm curious on how pi actually works in there.
So that's a really good question. So pi is now so fundamental and so accepted as just being it's basically like one of the fundamental constants of the universe, basically, that we kind of take it as given that it exists, and we don't have to question it, and we don't have to do anything weird to wrangle it or estimate it. It's just it's there, and it's available as this very well approximated number in virtually any programming language, and then we use that as a tool to do everything else. So in my case, the way that pi comes up is, if you have something that's periodic, you come back to where you started.
Gotcha.
Right? That's the intuitive definition. And what happens with periodic phenomena, even if, let's say, you're tracing a curve in this high dimensional space. I mean, if you even in 3 dimensions, you can trace this complicated path in 3 dimensions like a roller coaster. But now, instead of 3 dimensions, imagine somehow that you're in n dimensions, 1,000 dimensions. If you come back to where you started, you can simplify all of that complicated path to a circle.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
So you can go from n dimensions to literally 1 dimension. And that is the fundamental idea behind my work. From going, okay, it takes capital T time to start and end this roller cycle ride in n dimensions. And, well, I can map that to a circle with period 2 pi.
What's the most challenging thing for you as you're trying to map these things?
Yeah.
And hey, your work doesn't sound easy, so I'm sure it's all difficult.
I'm like I'm sitting here like trying to picture like 4-dimensional spaghetti and then a circle with your
Yeah. So it's funny because in math it's actually very easy to write down, because in 3 dimensions, if you recall parametric curves, so it's literally like an x coordinate that depends on time, y coordinate that depends on time, z coordinate that depends on time. And you have these 3 coordinates in 3 dimensions, and they can, each coordinate will just do something, right? X of t will vary over time, y and z. And instead of 3 coordinates, well, why don't we just add more? And each coordinate you add on increases the dimension, and it's still just easy to look at. You still have these however many coordinates that are each individually varying in time. So that's the way that I think about things in n dimensions. But as to how to physically visualize it, there is one way, which is to get a plate of spaghetti and just stare at it for a while. That's how you visualize in 4 dimensions. Because for the 4th dimension, you can take to be time. So what you're looking at is how the spaghetti changes over time, and that is your 4th dimension.
Mic drop.
That is super cool. Yeah. I was gonna say that's such a cool application of pi to use in your day-to-day work. Like, I think the last time I used pi in my work was I was literally making a PIE pie chart, but to kind of segment things out and draw the graphics, I needed to think in radians for the first time since like Calc 1, and using the math.py library. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. Like, I haven't thought about this in years, but I don't know. I like yours more.
Me too.
But I guess to answer your question, Natalie, so I guess, yeah, I mean, there are things that are hard, but I am trained in this, right? You're seeing the work that I do is the result of over 10 years of training in really, specific methods. So I think that's actually a pretty loaded question now that I think about it. But I guess in terms of the research, the stuff that I'm struggling with right now is not struggling. So I'm making progress on it, but as a field, we're moving away from oscillators that talk to each other pairwise. So imagine like a group of people standing in a circle, and they're each having a conversation. And whenever there is a conversation, someone can only talk to one other person. And in the field of coupled oscillators, that was how we viewed things for a very long time. Now there are exceptions to this, but I'm talking about the general formulation. Not looking at specific models, we really thought about just only pairwise interactions. And now what the field is doing is looking at conversations where one person can talk to 3 people at once, or 4 people at once. And likewise, 5 different people can affect one person when they all talk at once. And that's kind of the recent kind of hot topic in the field. So and then I guess to more directly answer your question, because these things are new, because these things are at the bleeding edge, there's no program, no one's written anything for this, so I have to be the one to write all of this code myself. And that can be kind of a pain because I'm not classically trained in programming. So I have to figure out, well, like, how do I debug this? How do I know that this is actually correct when I don't know what the ground truth is? So yeah, that should give you some idea.
It all comes down to programming being difficult. Pickle, I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, we're a special breed of crazy, that's for sure.
Oh man, I think the most recent episode of time of this one will still be the one where you managed to wipe an operating system from within itself.
That was unbelievable. I like Mac OS a lot, but not for that reason.
Did you do the RF?
It was even sillier than that. It was literally in the Mac OS partitioning screen, like the GUI. It just let me wipe the drive. And my only explanation, like I say in the episode, is I think enough of the OS was in RAM that it just kind of let me do it and continue about my business.
Oh my
goodness. Oh yeah, I wasn't on that, but I've been there before where like you can delete a file in Linux and like still edit it and then close it and it's gone.
That's terrible. Like, who designed that?
Well, the alternative is you have something that happened to me recently where I was working on a file in Windows and I moved it and it wasn't actually where it said it was moved to be because it just kind of had like a ghost file because it can't delete stuff. So like computers, all these sorts of things kind of become increasingly cursed the deeper you dig into them.
Someone thought it was a good idea at one point, but
and
it's gonna mess someone else up.
I'm sitting there really understanding why they threw that mathematician off a boat.
I know. Hearing that, I'm like, that's what all great scientific discoveries that happened, in ancient times, people just hated that so much, like how everybody was like, oh, the earth is flat, and then the one person proved that, no, we revolve around the sun, like the sun doesn't revolve around us, and he was like ostracized from the church. Things. Like he was not like
that was Galileo. Those are two different things, right? There's the heliocentric model where Galileo was like,
yeah,
no,
I'm getting ahead of myself.
The sun doesn't revolve around us, but they think they already have the concept of revolving. Although
they did have the concept of revolving, and they thought the sun revolved around us.
Yeah, and that the mathematical model is really interesting. And to be honest, I don't know the full details, but I do understand if you assume that Earth is the center, you can still accurately model the rotation of the orbit of the planets around the Earth. But you have to do things like ellipses within ellipses within ellipses. It gets very complicated. Whereas if you assume that the sun is the center, the model just becomes significantly simpler. And I think that's a really nice example of Occam's razor.
That's awesome.
Simplest explanation is the best one for those who haven't heard.
Totally.
My favorite term, Occam's razor. Yeah.
Well, looks like we're nearing the end of our first ever Minisode. While we wrap up, definitely want to make our listeners aware that Youngmin has a YouTube channel. It's called ADHD Mathematician. Youngmin, I believe you walk through...
Yeah, I talk about a lot of different stuff, but I found that a lot of channels, especially bigger ones, don't talk about the science behind ADHD. And they also don't talk about ADHD as experienced day to day by someone more in kind of the academic side of the world. So I talk about my day-to-day life, my coping strategies, and I was only diagnosed recently at the age of 31, and I'm 34 now.
Wow.
So I went through all of undergrad and grad school not knowing even I had ADHD. I was completely in denial. It was terrible. And I'd like that to not, happen to other people. And then not only that, but but going through these papers and really showing that, look, there is like, look at this evidence, looking at the evidence from kind of a naive, blind perspective, and seeing, okay, this evidence really does speak for itself. And I think, for whatever reason, my audience really enjoys it. And I think there could be a lot of overlap with our audiences.
Definitely agree. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining. Listeners, let us know what you thought of the Minisode 2. We're thinking of kind of incorporating more of these. So any feedback's appreciated. In the bio to this episode, we're going to link our social. We're going to link Youngmin's YouTube account, and we'll be sharing links on social as well. But thanks so much for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm truly amazed that we managed to keep so many cans of worms on the shelf. There's definitely an opportunity to come back and open a few more of them, because there were especially a few that I'm like sitting there like eyeing hungrily, like, oh my god, I want that.
What are you, fish?
Yeah.
If I had fish, oh man, feels like it sometimes. But yeah, there were definitely some very interesting things that we did not bring up. But thank you so much for coming on and explaining pi and kind of all these cool math things.
Thanks for having me.